It's Calgary's podcast on the Canada's Podcast Network.
Today's guest is Gilbert Williams. Eric is a Canadian entrepreneur, business mentor, inventor, and author in progress. He grew his last venture to 60 people, several million dollars in annual revenue, and reached the number 20 spot for the fastest growing company in Canada, as per the Growth 500 list. As a teenager, Eric struggled with drugs and gangs, but he found redemption through embracing the entrepreneurial spirit with a laser-like intensity. Eric is now helping other entrepreneurs with their business and writing a book to help struggling teenagers and their families experience a similar type of redemption and success in life. So Eric, thanks for joining us today and welcome to the show.
Thank you, Bonnie, for the great introduction. I appreciate your time and I'm excited to be here.
Well, why don't we jump right in and you can tell me a little bit about how you actually got started in your business that you've recently sold and just a little bit about your entrepreneurial journey so our listeners have an opportunity to get to know you a bit.
Sure. And it depends on how far back we want to go, right? And, from the Calgary perspective, I moved to Calgary from Kitchener, Ontario in November 2006. And I moved out while the construction season was in boom time, right? Well, oil was in boom, and of course the down effect and the consequences, positive on construction. So I moved from Kitchener in my rusty old van all the way across country with an old friend of mine. And we came to Calgary to do construction, to do roofing specifically. And over the years that evolved to be more general construction and getting involved with mostly exterior of residential, like townhouses and that type of work. And since then I've made Calgary a home. I love it there. It's great, and it still is my home, and I can see myself there for a long time. And that's kind of jumping in middle of the story. Going back further from there, I was always feeling like an entrepreneur when I was little. I didn't know what the word was. Cutting lawns is something that a lot of people will do, and I did that too. But I like to sell lawnmowers. I would buy them and sell them, right? And I like trading card games like other kids did too. But next thing I know, I'm 12 years old and I'm wheeling and dealing with the card store owners to buy his bulk inventory, and I was selling them through the newspaper classified ads, because of course internet and Craigslist and Kijiji weren't really around at that time. So I was always doing these real and deal type of ventures and ideas. I was breeding fish at one point when I was 13, and it just all these weird things when I was really little, and it just latched onto it. I loved it. I found excitement and passion on doing these, hey, let's create something ideas out of nothing. So everyone's got their own different passion, whether it's art or dance or business or like learning or teaching or exploring or nature. Like everyone's got their own specific niche that they really, really enjoy. And I'm not gonna try and guess what it is, but for me, I found it in being an entrepreneur and nurtured that when I was very young. I got into a lot of trouble when I was 16. Now cannabis is a pretty cool business right now. I have a lot of friends that are doing some great stuff in it. My cannabis business didn't work out too good. Right? You could say I got in a little bit too early, right? I didn't have government support back then. So that was a problem when I was a teenager. Basically, I'm saying I was selling cannabis when I was a teenager, and it was a bad idea. I got in a lot of trouble, right? I got arrested. It was terrible, and I ended up dropping out of school. I got kicked out of the house, type of thing. It was a bad scenario, right? I was in a lot of trouble. I was living in a drug house. There was gangs. There was a lot of violence. Frankly, people started to die. It was really, really bad. And the more I was there, the less exciting it was, the less fun it was, right? The more reality sunk in, the less I felt like I was moving forward. Right? I got into all that because I was escaping these feelings that I had as a kid of feeling trapped. And this is a side subject that I think we'll come back to, that I feel very passionate about on the subjects of teen suicide, teen violence, and drugs itself. And this is what my book is about. It's a deep dive into what the heck's going on and how can we decrease the impact of and the occurrence of this type of a tragedy in our society. So that's what my book's about, and maybe we'll come back to that later. The point is, I got into a lot of trouble, and by the time I was 18, I realized I really, really wanted to change. I didn't want to have that life anymore. I wanted to do something better. I wanted to make a difference. I wanted to be the best version of myself, which my crowd at the time was not going to let me do. Right? And it's not that they didn't want me to, it's that it just wouldn't happen, right? You are who you hang around. So when I was 18, I got recruited into a direct sales organization. And the guy that recruited me in, he wanted to help me out. Sure, that's true. But he also wanted to recruit people that could sell. And he said, he says, I don't care what you've done in the past. I just care what you've done now. He really gave me a chance to be someone different and start over. And I embraced it with everything that I had. And I learned how to sell in a professional way, right? I'm not talking about sleazy car salesman type stuff. I'm talking about actually helping people and improving their lives in a way that's profitable for both parties, right? That's what professional sales is. I latched onto that, learned how to do this, ended up growing to the top spot in the company really, really fast. I helped them expand across Canada at the time. And that was really, really cool. That was my first authentic venture that I got to grow on. And it also taught me and exposed me to personal development books, workshops, seminars, cassette tapes at the time, right? And all that kind of good, positive vibe, right? That company ended up on their own, on the founder level, ended up not working out, which was devastating for me, of course. But what am I going to do? I was, 19, 20 at the time. So then I ended up, kind of feeling lost for a bit. And there's a couple little ventures I've played with there that I'll skip through because they're not really relevant. I ended up doing a event production company in the Greater Toronto area. And I would host events, fly in keynote speakers, trade shows, booths. And I was about 20 years old at that point. So it was just amazing. I got to be in front of the stage. I was a really, really awkward kid growing up. And doing this kind of stuff forced me to come out of my shell and find a way to communicate with the rest of the world, right? So I did this event production company for a while. And I ended up hiring my first business coach who, was an amazing guy. He's still my friend to this day. And he helped me a lot, but he was also a bit of an asshole because, you see, he taught me about burn rates, which I did not understand at the time. I understood at the time. I was an entrepreneur at the time, right? I got marketing, I got inspiration, I got leadership, I had vision. I was innovative. I was excited, I had lots of enthusiasm, but I didn't understand business. At the time, I didn't understand what accounting was or how, all the structure and formality of the, key performance indicators and timelines and putting together a proper financial forecast and plans. Anyways, I was broke. I had maxed out my third line of credit and I was going under. Game over. So I went through a bit of a withdrawal for a few months. I was a nighttime janitor, cleaning up the most disgusting floors you can possibly imagine at the worst bars that exist in Waterloo University crowd. And if you went to school in Waterloo, you know exactly what bar I'm talking about. And I was the janitor cleaning it in the middle of the night. And finally, my coach said, why don't you try construction? I had been roofing as an employee off and on. He said, why don't you give this a shot? I did my first contract through a friend of mine it was in Brampton, and I loved it, right? Being on the roof, getting the muscles exposed and just sweating and looking at my finished product. And I ended up making a lot of money at it too. This is really great. Calgary was in boom time. So I did the logical thing, moved to Calgary in the middle of winter. It was like minus 35 degrees. And I was there to do roofing, which was a horrible idea, right? The worst thing you can imagine. It is just, I didn't think very much. I was just excited. I was a typical excited entrepreneur that just moved forward without thinking and made it work ultimately, right? And then the company grew to 60 people, built up a lot of revenue and sold it. And that's kind of in a nutshell. I probably rambled too much there.
No, it's all good. It's all good. And so you come to Calgary in the middle of the winter and end up having a very successful company. So looking at kind of that part of your journey, what were some of the greatest challenges that you faced here specifically in Calgary? And then the follow-up question to that on the flip side is, what were some of the greatest successes or what were the best things about doing business here?
Sure. Yeah. Some of the early first challenges were, to deal with boom time, right? When boom time is happening, and everyone who's in Calgary who was around for this, right? When boom time hits, there is a lot of shit that needs to get done immediately. There is no time left, right? There's no time limit, especially in construction, right? If the house isn't built or the building isn't built by a certain schedule, huge penalties fall on the powers that be, which rolls downhill, right? So we have to deal with a large volume and maintain the same quality, right? So, how do you hire when there's no one there to hire because they're being poached, every second day? How do you get 10 jobs done when you only have time for 5? How do you keep quality to a level where, you're feeling good about your own work and you're giving a good product while hitting these timelines? These were the kind of early challenges that were happening from 2006. Probably, realistically for a few years, 2009 wasn't a really good year in Calgary, which, for construction that's kind of the second challenge, I'm to say, was dealing with, the downtimes. 2009-ish was not as pleasant as earlier. And then of course, 2014, 15 was pretty rough. And, I'm out of that business now, so I'm not having to deal with, the reality of the difficult situations that have continued, and big election, that just happened. I'm not going to get into that, but we'll see where that goes.
Well, and I guess, that's a really timely point, because we are still struggling economically in the city. And so in those years when you were running your company here, like, what were some of the things that you did to keep it going and to be successful? And what advice could you pass on to entrepreneurs who are maybe in the same boat now because of the reality of the economy we have?
Right. And I was saying earlier that I was an entrepreneur, I wasn't a business person, right? And I feel like, so many people out there get excited about an idea. We wake up and we say, I'm going to do something better. Or we're at work and we're like, I can do it better than my boss, he's an idiot. Or, I'm going to change the world. We just have this blinding flash of inspiration. That's an entrepreneur. And, entrepreneurs need to become business people. They're not the same thing, right? Now, and vice versa is true too. A business person is not an entrepreneur. You can have as much schooling as you possibly want. You can have, as much experience dealing with an organization or a healthy, mature company as you want. That's great. But if you don't have that entrepreneurial spirit, right, you're kind of like a watchdog. You're like a guardian over something that already exists without being able to create something new. And if you want to look at, the HP story and what happened with HP over the last 20 years and watch that evolution to where they are today. There's a classic example of that. The entrepreneurial division and then the business, watchdog division. So I won't get into that right now, but think about this. If you're an entrepreneur and you got excited about an idea and you're driving on a few key strengths that you have, remember that your few key strengths are only a few key strengths. They're not all the key strengths. And if you're going to get successful, if you're going to make it through downtime, if you're going to make it through boom time, if you're going to make it through, that first 5 or 10 years where most companies fail, you need to be something called the specialized generalist, right? What I'm talking about as a specialized generalist is, you need to be able to flex into what your organization needs at any moment, at any time, forever, right? This isn't something, you can't force your way through an accounting issue by being good at sales. And you can't force yourself through a sales situation by being good at the law, right? They're just different departments. And if so many entrepreneurs get an early success, get early starts by being exemplary, by being top of their game and then some at one or two specific areas of the business. And so I'm going to suggest to you to, step off the high horse a little bit, right? Tuck away that ego and look at what you're not good at and just be vulnerable about it. Be honest about it. Ask for help about it. Grow and learn about it, right? Don't pretend that you can hide those flaws and hide those weaknesses forever, because they will surface. And the longer you delay them or postpone it, the more they're going to explode, kind of like keeping a volcano underground too long. The pressure just builds up until eventually, and it will, pop through the surface, and you're going to have to deal with all that lava burning down all around you, right? We don't want it to burn down your business. So, a company goes through what I call this business puberty phases. And, I can only speak to organizations up to, about 60, say I'd be comfortable around 100 in size. So there's a lot of guys out there dealing with thousands of people, and that's just not my realm yet, right? Maybe next time we talk, it will be. But this business puberty from 0 to 5 employees is an awkward phase. 5 to 10 is a different skill set completely. 10 to 20 is going to, take your leadership and your ability to manage to a whole new level. And 20 to 40, 40 to 80, these are the different phases of business puberty, and they're as awkward as anything else. Sweaty palms, your voice gets all weird when you're trying to do a big sales contract and you just can't speak anymore and you feel all stupid, right? That's what I'm talking about. And you gotta be ready for those things and think about them and plan for them in advance.
And so when you think about like your experiences here in Calgary, and I think you're right, this is a time maybe of trepidation here and a bit of anxiety, but what were some of the best things the city had to offer? And I think you bring a great perspective because you have worked, in Ontario and grown your company to such a successful size. But what was it that really kept you in Calgary all those years?
Calgary is just a great city, right? There's friendly people, they're welcoming. It's like a land of opportunity. To me, it's not the most entrepreneurial part and I can a little more broadly say about Alberta, but I'm a little biased towards Calgary. If it's not the most entrepreneurial spirit that there is in Canada, then it's pretty close, right? There's just a lot of people that want to do things. They want to create, and I go to a lot of the meetups and different meetings and meet a lot of people and people in my network too. They're doing some cool stuff, right? A lot of people say that Calgary has no tech presence. Well, there's some pretty monster tech companies that have come out of Calgary, right? And the same is true with other industries too. And in construction, again, there's some monsters that came out of Calgary or Edmonton, right? If you look at the stats, just do a little Google search for big companies that came out of Alberta, right? And you'll see quite a few. So I found it to be a really friendly city. I felt like I was treated and brought in like family. I made really, really good friends almost immediately when I arrived. Of course, being close to the mountains is just a bonus, right? To be that close to such beautiful nature that only exists in certain parts of the world. And I feel like we have a great economy. We have to just get through this little tough spot right now. And there's a lot of division about, who's right and wrong. And the political realm is, very clearly in one side or the other. Like there is no confusion about, what Alberta is really leading towards. And we got to get through this, right? So there's a lot for us to work on. But, we've come through a lot. We've come a long, long way from, some of the downtimes in the past. And I feel like it's just going to be a matter of time when we come back to that. And hopefully we end up getting to a position where we can really lead Canada in a more serious way and be taken a little more seriously in our opinions. That would be my hope. So I feel like that's something that we can really, bring to the table.
Well, and you've had a very unique experience that not a lot of the entrepreneurs that I've interviewed so far have had, in that you've sold your company and made significant revenue off of that. So what's your next step? Like, where are you going next, Eric, in your career, and what do you hope to do?
Well, right now I'm kind of just taking a breather and using that breather to do entrepreneurial things. That's just kind of automatic. I'm writing my book right now, which is really important to me. I mentioned earlier, to me, when kids hit a breaking point, there's one of three things that happen. And the breaking point is different for everyone, right? One of my friends, it's just such a tragedy. His son committed suicide, and he was a very, very young teenager. No one saw it coming. There was no clear indicator. It just happened, right? And obviously, the first thing that comes to your mind is, well, why? Why did this happen? How did this happen? And every kid has a breaking point, and it looks very different for everyone. And when that happens, to me, one of three things happen. There's harm to self, extreme case suicide. There's harm to others. Extreme case is, shootings in schools. And the third one is avoidance. And that one usually involves drugs. That's the one that I went down. I didn't choose violence in any way. I hid in drugs because I thought that would be my easier escape. And I think that this is something that doesn't have to be there. It is avoidable. There's ways to decrease the statistics and increase the success and the happiness. So for me, writing this book is a passion project. I don't really expect to make fortunes off it. That's not really the idea. In fact, if I do, I'm probably going to donate it to charity. I'm focusing on this book with everything that I got. I really want to make an impact. I'm also coaching and mentoring other business people locally in Calgary as well as abroad. It's something I'm very passionate about. I've always had a business mentor helping me, so now I get to be that person in return. And that's launched my website for that, and anyone can check that out. And the next venture that I really latch onto, I'm still going to wait another 6 months because I'm kind of got my hands tied with the book still. But I want to get involved in tech. I spent a lot of time in old school construction, and that was great. Now I really want to do something that's going to hit the technology, hit the IT realms. And I've developed software with teams before, 7 softwares to be specific. Some were in construction, some were in sentiment analysis, and some were basically, there were just a few different types of technology and types of software I was working with. And I want to join or build something in that realm. So that's where you're probably going to see me in the next year. Wow. I'm being vague, by the way, on purpose, because there's a couple of days involved. So sorry if that was a little bit vague, but
that is all good. And we look forward to seeing what happens for you next. I'm wondering, so you mentioned you had a business mentor, but what has been the best piece of advice that you've ever gotten in terms of either as an entrepreneur or how to grow your business? Like, what would you pass along to our listeners today?
Yeah, I'd say, the first thing that comes to mind is just, come back down to earth, right? One of the people I work with was stuck. He was just beating himself up, saying, he's trying to find the next greatest idea, the next big thing. And that's really not needed, right? Every time I felt really stuck in a company, my way always through it was to come back to the basics, right? Let's look at it from a fundamental business perspective. Let's just do the simple little tiny things every day that we know will get us incrementally forward and take little steps and inches towards whatever objective and goal we have. Right. So, unicorns are great. It's a cool little word that's popped up over the last 5 years. Right. And, everyone wants to have a unicorn and build the next unicorn. Right. Wonderful. Great. Keep that in mind. That's the home run. But home runs aren't really where the baseball game is. Right. The baseball games are won through singles and doubles. Right. Going to fundamental business basics. So that's something I'm going to encourage anyone listening is to look at your business from a fundamental ground up perspective. What's the little things that you can do right now? And what are the little things you can inspire your team to do right now that just inch your way forward one little step at a time? Next thing you know, that home run will show up, but you got to be patient for it and you got to be positioned for it, right? You want the home run when you got bases full, right? It's such a waste to have a home run and no one's on base, right? So focus on those singles and doubles, get those little steps forward. Be the specialized generalist, right? Focus on those core fundamental business subjects as a priority, not the big pie in the sky magic silver bullet.
Awesome. Well, now I'd like to shift gears a bit and get to know you a little bit more personally. So we have a number of we call them our rapid fire questions, but tell us about a book that you would recommend to all of our listeners to read. Is there one book that's really meant a lot to you over the years?
First one that comes to mind is Peaceful Warrior by Dan Millman. That's one of my favorite books. There's a movie about it as well. And you can criticize the acting for being cheesy if you would like. I don't really care. I think it's a great movie. The concept is about mental toughness and about identifying your passion and sticking to it with everything that you've got. There's no holds back. So that's a book that meant a lot to me. And I referred back to it many, many times through the years when I was having my toughest times, dealing with business challenges. So that's the first one.
Yeah. And do you have a favorite podcast or resource or online website that you go to on a regular basis that just helps you to continue with your own professional development?
I follow a lot of podcasts, right? Like Daily, the Daily Grind, Boiling Point, Canada's podcast, right? And there's a lot of millionaire interviews is a cool one as well. I like to just, if I was to say anything, audible.com, right? I am such a busy guy and everyone is such a busy person. But everyone can listen to an audiobook while you're cooking or have it on the radio in your car while you're driving or listening to it while you're waiting in line somewhere. And I've just pounded through so many good books by just, plugging in those earphones and finding what author is doing some cool stuff, right? If you're interested about startups, listen to some cool startup books. If you're struggling with management, listen to some really cool management books. There's no excuse. You can't say that you don't have time when audiobooks are available at your fingertips.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the traveling university, right?
It is.
Yeah. Well, and speaking of traveling, so I know you are traveling now, but can you share with us a couple of your favorite places to be in the world, or is there some place that you'd like to travel that you haven't yet been? Love to know a little bit more about your plans that way.
Sure. Yeah, I did. I did a motorcycle trip down the west coast of Canada. I went from Calgary to BC down to Tijuana and all the way down that coast, right? And that's such a beautiful, beautiful drive. If you get a chance to check that out, it's wonderful. Same as I forget what it's called. I think it's called the Going to the Sun Road or To the Sun or something like that. Just south of Alberta, and that's something. It's just some beautiful roads right beside, right in our backyard, right? I'm in Thailand right now, in the north part of Thailand. And man, the people are so friendly here. It's strange for a Canadian to say that other people are so friendly, right? I love what I'm experiencing out here, and I'm probably going to pop by Africa after and see what that looks like. And there's a lot of conflict going on in a lot of areas there. So kind of bracing myself. I definitely want to go to New Zealand at some point, and it's just one of these little things. I have this inspiration. I want to see the All Blacks. I want to get some infield seats right up close and watch a good rugby game, right? That's something that's exciting. And California is such a beautiful state as well to go and visit. I've been there a bunch of times, and I'll probably be going back sooner than later. It's the first stuff that pops to mind.
Globetrotter, those are like all over the place.
Keeps it interesting.
That's true. I'm wondering, do you have like a ritual, either in terms of like a morning routine or an evening routine, that you really just try to follow religiously to like help either start your day on the right tone or end it in the right way. We hear, a lot of successful entrepreneurs have a routine that's really fundamental to part of their success and their mindset.
Yeah, if I was to nail down just one that I would call the most important or the most significant, it's every morning I take out my journal, and this is the first thing I do when I wake up, right? So for me, it's got to be the first thing. And I pull out my journal and I write 3 things that I feel very grateful for. And the trick is not to just write about it, it's to experience it, right? So take that pencil, hold it on the paper, and let's just say that I don't know what to write about today. So I'm going to write down that I feel grateful that my pillow was comfortable, right? And it sounds stupid, but it's just simple things. They don't have to be big, giant things, right? But before writing, the principle and the concept is to feel that gratitude, actually go in and imagine what a sleeping on a rock would feel like. And then remember, you got a pillow, right? I feel grateful that my pillow was comfortable. And once I feel that gratitude, then I can start to write with meaning, right? It's not just the word anymore. Words have power when there's meaning, right? And when I write that I feel grateful for, fill in the blank, whatever it happens to be, then it triggers my brain to go in a certain direction immediately as soon as I wake up. And by the time I do that 3 times, it's weird, but I swear I find that if I do that consistently, usually my days go a little bit better than otherwise. When really bad things happen, I deal with it better, right? It's not a magic solution in making everything go perfect. It doesn't do that at all. It just helps me respond better. And, we can't choose what happens to it. I can't choose what happens to me, but I can choose what to do about it. And there's a difference between reacting and responding, right? Reacting is emotional and negative, and responding is, oh, okay, this is what I have to deal with right now. This is what I'm going to choose to do. And they're 2 different things altogether. So that's my morning ritual.
That's great. That's great. Well, we're wrapping things up. I have 2 more questions for you. So the first one is a hypothetical question we ask all of our guests. And this should be easy for you to do because you're already traveling. But if you could imagine that we were to drop you off on a beautiful island. It was very remote. There is no access to internet, Wi-Fi, that kind of thing. So you can't bring your phone or tablet or a computer. There is a phone booth. So when you're ready, you can call us and we will send the boat, Alice Survivor style, to come get you. I'm just curious, how long do you think you'd last and what would you do while you're there?
Well, it's funny. I think I'd probably last out there longer than I would here, without the stress of technology and pressure and social pressures. And, I think that it's a healthy, good thing, medical issues aside, right, to be away from technology for whatever period of time it happens to be. So I think I would last, as long as I felt like it, to be honest. And the longer that I'm away from technology, the less need there is to be back to it. Once you break the addiction, right, then we get to really be more authentic. And what I would do, probably after the basic survival stuff was all mastered, maybe do some coconut bowling. I don't know. That's probably a good idea. I was Tarzan at an old costume party years ago. I'd probably, build a better costume and start a little leaf-based clothing line, maybe. Keep myself busy. Practice my yodeling would maybe be an idea. Hopscotch in this. I don't know. Just the point is have some fun, right? The point is that little kids know how to have fun with anything in any circumstance, no matter what's going on at any point in any day, right? And as an adult, it's so easy to lose that. And I feel like it's important to be able to tap back into the inner child and be just simple and basic, just be fun once in a while at least. And I think that being stranded on an island might be a great opportunity to do that.
That's great advice. That's great advice. So we're winding things down here. I'm just wondering, is there anything else that you'd like to say to our listeners or share in terms of either your experience as an entrepreneur or doing business in Calgary or Canada before we go today?
Well, I think that specifically in Calgary, there might be some people that are maybe struggling a little more than others in their business. They might have had some early success and now it's like, geez, what do we do now? And, I feel like there is always a way through it. And, building my company was not easy, obviously. And there was a couple spots where we're skimming, just skimming above the line of financial bankruptcy. It's like, oh, what do we do? Right. And at the end of the day, sticking together and coming back to to good old fashioned core values. Why are we here? What's the ultimate thing we're trying to do? How do we improve our basic quality and experience and customer experience? And just come back to basics, and every single day, just do the best you can every day. Cut those expenses, and make that client a little bit more happy. Inspire your team by being a better you, right? And one day at a time, just get through it. And finally, the economy is going to come back around, and we'll get through this together.
I think that's a great way to end things, and would love for you to share with our listeners, how can they find you online? Where's the best place to connect with you?
You can find me on LinkedIn or my website. It's just my full personal name, Eric Gilbert Williams. It's ERIC, and then Gilbert Williams. There's no hyphens. So ericgilbertwilliams.com is my website, or driveupprofits.com is the same thing. LinkedIn, you can find me there, and just send me a message. I have a Twitter account, and I don't use it as much as I should, but I'm getting there, right? I was in the construction for too long, I think. And I'd be happy to talk to anyone about their business, right? I find it very enjoyable to help other entrepreneurs, get from wherever they are to the next step. I'm no Richard Branson, right? But that's okay, because neither are you, right? We're all just trying to get from where we are one step forward, and I'd invite the call.
Yeah. Well, Eric, it's been great to talk to you. Your energy and passion is infectious. I've really enjoyed our conversation. So thank you so much for being a guest on Calgary's podcast today. We really enjoyed having you here.
I'm honored to have been a guest, and I really appreciate your time. Thank you very much as well.